booktube. I'm continuing this this slightly unconventional read along that I'm doing of the Lord of the Rings. I'm doing this with David Wiley and Tony from An Erudite Adventure, and we decided to skip the Fellowship of the Ring and start immediately on the Two Towers. And I've never quite done this before. I've read this book many, many times, and I have also picked it up and picked through it many, many times to go to your favorite bits, as you do with any of your favorite books. But starting in the middle of the book and just reading from there has been a great revelation to me. This has shown me the book in a new light, so I'm very grateful that that my presence was tolerated for this event. And of course, unlike my co-hosts, I am not doing a video a week or every 10 days or whatever. I decided right away. We broke the Two Towers up into 4 parts for reading in February, and February is over. But I decided right away to do a chapter every day. It's just sort of what you'd expect from this channel. And oh boy, the chapter that we are at today. Oh boy, this is a chapter called Shelob's Lair. This follows the story. We have been following the story for the second half of the Two Towers of the two hobbits. Frodo, who is bearing the One Ring of Power to Mordor to destroy it. Even though Mordor is the stronghold of Sauron, the Dark Lord and creator of the One Ring, who you would presume you couldn't take by surprise in his own home. He's gone with his servant Sam, a shrewd but simple hobbit, and they are being shadowed and guided by the creature Gollum, who we meet in Tolkien's book The Hobbit, and who is originally had the ring. Frodo's cousin Bilbo steals it from him. Gollum is a weird, pathetic figure. We have seen often in the chapters that we've read so far in February that Tolkien can't ever quite bring himself to make Gollum a complete villain. He shows us tender sides at the oddest moments. Gollum, right up until this chapter, elicits sympathy from the reader. I believe that in this chapter that disappears completely, because in this chapter it is made completely manifestly clear to the reader that Gollum intends to deliver Frodo and Sam to a gruesome death in order to get the ring back. Gollum is in love with his precious and wants it back. And he knows that they need another path to get to their destination. They want to get to the molten fires of Mount Doom at the heart of Barad-dûr. And the main way to do that is through the Black Gate, Sauron's Black Gate, which is utterly impregnable. So they need another way, and Gollum knows another way. A pass through the mountains and past the cursed ring-wraith city of Minas Morgul and into the stronghold of Sauron that way. But Gollum also knows what's in that path and what guards it, and that is the subject of this chapter. That is a character in the book called Shelob, a creature called Shelob, who is essentially a giant spider. If you've seen the Peter Jackson movies, will already have been totally grossed to your toenails by the Shelob that he produces in those movies. It's pretty clear, we are told explicitly in this chapter, that Shelob is not actually a spider. Shelob is an ancient, evil being that just happens to take the form of something like a spider. But she lives in that high pass and feeds occasionally on the very unlucky orcs that are brought her away, or occasionally, as we're told, Sauron would sometimes send prisoners for whom he had no further use to her lair, with an unspeakable fate awaiting them. Because oftentimes Shelob just pricks you a little with poison just to make you go limp as a fish, and then stores you as food, or who knows what else. Who knows what else. In this chapter we get horrible, horrible intimations. But Frodo and Sam don't know that she's there. They don't know anything about that. It's in this chapter that, and the next one, that we learn that Gollum does know she's there. He has met her, and he has promised her food in the shape of Sam and Frodo. Somehow he manages not to be killed by Shelob herself. Just himself. He manages somehow to make a deal with her. I've never really understood that. She doesn't seem sentient to me, so I don't know how Gollum would have even had the chance to do that without getting speared and then webbed. But he does, and his assumption, which is probably correct, is that Shelob won't care about the ring. She won't care about clothing or sting or anything. She'll discard all of that which means the ring will just be there. If no one wants it, Gollum will gladly take it. It's in these chapters, these final chapters of The Two Towers, that we learn Gollum's perfidy, and I think after this, it's impossible to view him with any of the sympathy that Tolkien has tried to imbue him with. And I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think Tolkien really tries that again after this point. But in Shelob's Lair, Frodo and Sam don't know what they're heading into. And they walk led by Gollum, into these passages that are completely devoid of light. They are darker. The comparison is actually made to the tunnels of Moria. But this is even darker and more oppressive, because this is something horrible. Something horrible is here in the darkness with them. At one point, in a very effective passage, they come close to an opening off the main hallway that they can feel is the source of that. They can feel that is where Shelob is. And they hurry past it. They get to, continuing climbing, they get to a part of the passage that seems blocked. And when they shine light on it, they have the Phial of Galadriel, a small container of living light that Galadriel has given Frodo as a gift for when all of the light goes out. They're using that here. It absolutely saves their lives. And when they use it to illuminate the space around them, not only do they see that Gollum is suspiciously completely gone, but they see that it's a gigantic web. And it's so tough that Sam's blade does not do anything to it. Frodo finally uses Sting, which is an elven forged blade, and it does cut apart the webs, which opens up the passage and allows them to go through, which no one else taking this passage would have ever had. They wouldn't have the ability to do that. And I wanted to read you a couple of sections here from this chapter, but the sections will be the same. They will be. This is entirely Shelob's chapter, just 100%. The introduction of this creature. We are told once Sam and Frodo, are making their way up this tunnel, and once they cut their way past the web, they're frantic to get to a roofless space. That's a very good way to put it. Frodo is so eager to get away from the black oppression of these dark, lightless corridors that he drops his caution. Shelob, as we're told, has many ways around her lair. She doesn't have just the one way. It's likely, in other words, that you won't see her coming. And Frodo doesn't. But I want to give you some descriptions of her, because Tolkien does a really good job, a really good creepy job. He writes, earlier on we're told that there are other potencies there are in Middle-earth, powers of night, and they are old and strong. And she that walked in the darkness had heard the elves cry that cry far back in the deeps of time, and she had not heeded it then, and it did not daunt her now. We're told about Shelob. There age-long had she dwelt, an evil thing in spider form, even such as once of old had lived in the land of the elves in the west, that is now under the sea, such as Beren fought in the mountains of terror in Doriath, and so came to Luthien upon the green sward amid the hemlocks and moonlight long ago. How Shelob came there, flying from ruin, no tale tells, for out of the dark years few tales have come. But still she was there, who was there before Sauron, and before the first stone of Barad-dûr, and she served none but herself, drinking the blood of elves and men, bloated and grown fat with endless brooding on her feasts, weaving webs of shadow, for all living things were her food, and her vomit darkness. Far and wide her lesser broods, bastards of the miserable mates, her own offspring, that she slew, spread from glen to glen, from Ephel-duath to the eastern hills, to Gald-o-gur and the fastness of Mirkwood, but none could rival her, Shelob the Great, last child of Ungoliant, to trouble the unhappy world. Lots and lots of really well-folded horror in that single paragraph. Lots and lots. First of all, a hint of her age, that she doesn't care about Sauron, and she was there long before he started building his fastness, but also that in addition to ordinary garden spiders that Sam Gamgee might encounter in his back in the Shire, there are also these children of Shelob, these, we have to assume, German shepherd-sized spiders that exist everywhere in Middle-earth. We haven't really seen them in Lord of the Rings. I think this is a direct nod to The Hobbit. But Tolkien goes on. Little she knew or cared for towers or rings or anything devised by mind or hand, who only desired death for all others, mind and body, and for herself a glut of life alone, swollen till the mountain could no longer hold her up, and the darkness not contain her. And you might be thinking, well, okay, so she's insatiable, just like Ungoliant. The mention of Ungoliant there is the mention of a character from the Silmarillion, from a really memorable passage in the Silmarillion. A giant, very much more powerful version of Shelob that was more powerful than Sauron's old boss. It was more powerful than Morgoth. We get that passage, and you might be thinking, all right, well, okay, so she's not a servant of Sauron. She doesn't care about him. So what does he think of that? I mean, she's living in a mountain pass, a day's walk from him. What must he think of that? And Tolkien does not omit that. He thinks about it too. He says, and as for Sauron, he knew where she lurked. It pleased him that she should dwell there hungry but unabated in malice, a more sure watch upon that ancient path into his land than any other that his skill could have devised. And orcs, they were useful slaves, but he had them in plenty. If now and again Shelob caught them to stay her appetite, she was welcome, he could spare them. And sometimes, as a man may cast a dainty to his cat he calls her, but she owns him not. Sauron would send her prisoners that he had no better uses for. He would have them driven to her hole and report back to him of the play she made. So they both lived, delighting in their own devices, and feared no assault, nor wrath, nor any end of their wickedness. Nor had yet any fly escaped from Shelob's webs, and the greater now was her rage and hunger. So we're getting a truce here, the description of a truce. That has always struck me as unconvincing. What is it that we're told here? Well, Tolkien says it himself. He gives us a parenthetical himself. This is the narrator of The Lord of the Rings, just in general. And sometimes, as a man may cast a dainty to his cat he calls her, but she owns him not. Surely that thought, which occurs to whoever is narrating The Lord of the Rings, also occurs to Sauron. It doesn't strike me as believable that Sauron would let this creature, who is essentially insatiable, that Sauron would let this creature live. I mean, we're told that she's a better guard for this approach to his kingdom than any that he could devise, but that's not true. That's not true at all. He could destroy her, could have destroyed her ages ago, when he had the One Ring, when he had the ability to do it. He could have destroyed her because she's not trustworthy. She wants to consume him. She wants to consume everything that lives. He could have destroyed her and just, bricked up this passage or filled it with armed orcs or trolls that are unquestionably obedient to him. It's an odd note. It's a weird thing that the ways in which Sauron will sometimes tolerate rival evils. And you have to wonder, especially in light of the fact of how much of his own power he's put in the One Ring, that maybe it's not tolerate. Maybe he's not able to do anything about it. But the action of the story takes place in the last page. The action of this chapter takes place in the last page. This chapter is the climax of The Two Towers. There's a chapter after it, but this is the climax. And the action takes place because Sam can see that Frodo is running on ahead. He's so happy to see the outside world after the choking horror of that corridor. Of those, they see, at least Shelob's eyes. They know that that a horrible monster is stalking them, and they barely get away. And Frodo is so happy about that sight that he doesn't pay attention to the fact that Shelob is outside. She's right behind him. She wants to capture him. Sam sees all this with horror, and he's about to run and intervene to the best of his ability when he is jumped by Gollum, who grabs him from behind. Because Gollum hates Sam, and because Gollum promised to serve Frodo well, to serve the bearer of the precious well. He didn't make any such promise about Sam, so they fight, and Sam wins. Sam eventually displays a ferocity that no one back in the Shire would recognize, but he's at the very end of the world. He's at the very end of all of his purposes and all of his quests, and he can see that his master is in danger. He fights off Gollum. He uses the staff that Faramir gave him, which breaks the first time he uses it, so I guess Faramir's men aren't all that good at making staffs. But it's too late. It's too late. Gollum has cost him the one moment that he had, and as the chapter ends, he knows that Frodo is gone, that Shelob has taken him. And that's how the chapter ends, that way. And we go on to the final chapter of the book, The Choices of Master Samwise. We'll do that tomorrow to finish out February, which, believe it or not, has come to an end. But there was one question that I had. I love the bits and pieces here. I love discovering these chapters as if for the first time. I love the heroism that we see in Sam. Who cares if he's a bit of a ninny? He's not only decent but valiant, and I love that. And the descriptions of Shelob are fantastic. I have my quibbles with this chapter. I don't really believe. I mean, in all this time, there's been so much time, centuries. In all this time, and especially while he had the One Ring, I think Sauron would have dispensed with Shelob. She's not trustworthy. She's right on the border of his kingdom. And, well, if you know the story of Ungoliant from the Silmarillion, Ungoliant fed on light, and it made Ungoliant bigger and bigger and more powerful. There was no limit. You think to yourself, well, what would happen? I mean, Gollum assures us, and the narrator assures us, that Shelob doesn't care about things like swords or towers or whatnot. But what would happen to Shelob if she ate the phial of Galadriel full of that elven light? It burns her. But what if she ate it? She'd become enormously more powerful. What if she ate the One Ring? Sauron must know the danger. It doesn't seem to me that he would, for all this time, allow that danger to be there. And feed it, for God's sake. Just not even allow it to die of starvation. Just intentionally propagate it. That was my quibble with the chapter, and my observation about the chapter that I've noticed this in the past. I actually had to grade a paper on this subject that wasn't very good a long time ago. But there is a parallel here to the end of the Fellowship of the Ring. Right? I mean, at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, at least at the climax of the Fellowship of the Ring, the narrative climax, we have one of our characters facing off against an evil being in desperate circumstances in that evil being's stronghold, in that evil being's home territory. And death is definitely on the table. That is Gandalf versus the Balrog. Here, it's Frodo and Sam versus Shelob, and the thing those two encounters have in common is that in both cases, in The Lord of the Rings, where the villain is Sauron, in both cases, that climactic battle is with a creature of pure evil that doesn't know that Sauron exists, or doesn't care, certainly isn't working for him. It could represent a severe danger to him. That is fascinating to me, that Tolkien works in that parallel, and I think there's a parallel at the end of The Return of the King as well. We shall see. Now that I'm crawling along in the book, I'm seeing a lot of fine detail that's just so much fun to be reminded of. So that was it. That is Shelob's Lair, where we get a true monster for the ages. Just wonderful. The guardian of this alternate route. Gollum was true in that regard. This is an alternate route into Mordor. But it has a guardian worse than any orc, worse than any troll. And that, I think, is just wonderful. Just wonderful. We're going to finish up tomorrow. So I will wrap this up for now, and I will see you then. Thank you.